Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We've got a busy afternoon ahead of us, starting off with Audit Committee and then moving on to our Strat session. So with that, I will turn it over to the ever hardworking Karina Tasker.
All right, thank you and welcome. So we have a very short agenda for Audit Committee, so I can get you on your way to your other meetings today. Just the one report, which is my quarterly audit status report, which is in your package. And on that, there are two audits that I've done over the past quarter. So the organizational review of the Office of Mayor and Council and my annual petty cash audit. Also in progress, or still in progress, is the community centers audit. I just wanted to give you a brief update on that. Originally, I had intended to bring that back in at the December Audit Committee meeting. Due to some factors out of my control, that will be pushed into 2016, but it is still underway, and we should have something to you in the new year. All right, so the first audit that I'll speak about is the organizational review of the Office of Mayor and Council. And since you were all participants in this review, you'll recall that the purpose of it was really to just look at the structure and the roles and responsibilities of the staff within the Office of Mayor and Council to make sure that it meets the needs of Council. So this was a relatively small review, and it had a very narrow scope. It did not look at anything other than the organizational structure and roles. So as you will recall, I started off the review by interviewing all of Council, the staff, and senior management, just to get your opinions on the org structure. I analyzed the strengths and weaknesses of the current structure and reviewed the job description details. And finally, I reached out to other municipalities to see whether their structure was similar to ours and whether there were any ideas for improvements. So in general, it was found that most of Council and all of senior management felt that the division as a whole provided very good or excellent customer service and valued administrative work. And none of you were dissatisfied with the overall services provided. Regarding the capacity, there were mixed opinions. Staff feel that they are able to handle their current workload, but that they have no capacity to take on any new tasks. They are stretched to their limit. Some of you mentioned that you wish that they could help you out more with various tasks, but that you were afraid to burden them with further work because they seem so busy. On the flip side, some of you feel that the division is overstaffed and could either decrease the number of staff or repurpose the existing headcount. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. One of the questions that I asked everyone during the consultation was what needs are currently not being met, if any. I got a variety of answers to this question, but three themes emerged. First, there's a desire for staff to become more proactive rather than reactive and provide more support for community engagement activities. Council would like assistance with things like becoming more active on social media, preparing blogs, setting up community meetings or media opportunities. They would like these needs anticipated and suggested by staff rather than having to tell them to do it. Second, Council would like more detailed analysis of the call statistics to help highlight any trending issues that they should be acting upon and as input into newspaper articles. There are currently some statistics which are pulled from the ACR system on a quarterly basis. However, it was indicated that this is not frequent enough, nor do they include analysis of the data. And finally, there was unanimous support for continuing with paid co-op placements as a cost-effective resource and as a way of providing exposure to government to students. I also asked that if budget were no issue, what changes stakeholders would make to the organizational structure, if any. In general, there was no consensus on an ideal model. Regarding the division size, as you can see, there was a range of opinions. 20% of all stakeholders, which included yourselves, senior management, and staff, felt that nothing needs to change and that the current structure is meeting our needs. 45% felt that more staff are needed as the city is growing and more value-added tasks are desired. Another 20% felt that less staff were needed or current staff could be repurposed. And 15% did not comment specifically about the size of the division. There was much confusion by all stakeholder groups regarding the purpose of the Chief of Staff role. People did not know what the role is responsible for. And part of this confusion is related to the job title, which many felt did not mean anything to them as they were unfamiliar with it. The final 2 points on this slide are ideas that came through the consultation. I'm not necessarily recommending them, but I'm simply showing them to show that I heard them and that I considered them in my analysis. So the first idea was to create capacity without adding staff. It involves switching from the current structure, where each constituency assistant provides support for 5 specific councillors, to a model where each assistant would be responsible for certain tasks for all councillors. For example, one person might be responsible for answering constituency concerns, while the other is responsible for scheduling and event invitations. The second idea was seen in the benchmarking data as well as mentioned by stakeholders. It involves changing permanent positions to contract positions that are tied to the term of council. Supporters of this model feel that this allows council to select individuals who support their political views and will work closely with them to implement their platforms. For the benchmarking, I contacted 9 cities, but only 6 responded. They included Hamilton, London, Calgary, Cambridge, Barrie, and Guelph. And as I said, the purpose of contacting these cities was just to see how they are organized and the relative size of their staff complement. The 3 smaller cities, which were Cambridge, Barrie, and Guelph, all had very similar structures to us. They had similar sized councils with 8 to 12 members and 2 to 2.5 staff who carried the titles of executive assistant and administrative assistant. Since the city is growing, I felt I should also see what a few larger cities were doing. Not surprisingly, Hamilton, London, and Calgary all had larger staff complements. This makes sense when we look at the size of their councils at 14 or 15 members and the fact that they are supporting significantly larger populations in a single-tier structure. What was surprising was the magnitude of the difference in size. These cities had 1 to 3 staff supporting each councillor, as well as 5 to 6 staff supporting the mayor, plus additional positions. So I won't go through the details, but they are included in your report. 2 of the larger cities do have chief of staff roles, but this is typically a title that's more often seen at the provincial or federal levels of government. The other cities who do not have chief of staff positions still have other staff performing those tasks associated with that role. And Barrie, Hamilton, and Calgary all had positions that were tied to the political term. However, they also all had some legacy permanent positions. So what does this all mean? I'll start off by saying that I don't feel that there's anything fundamentally wrong with the current structure. There are some improvements and tweaks that can be made, however. So first, their starting place should be to create a divisional mission and mandate to help clarify and rationalize which services they should be providing to council. It should provide direction for the division to move from focusing on administrative proficiency to focusing on providing those value-added services and analysis for council. This sets the stage and empowers staff to then take the initiative and may also free up a small amount of capacity if some current tasks are discontinued. Second, staff need to meet with council to further define what you need in regards to support for community engagement and outreach. Together, you need to determine what that support looks like, who will provide it, and how often. Depending on the scope of what you decide, this may require more staff. Next, staff need to receive training on the current ACR system if they don't already have it, and more importantly, develop a process to provide more timely and enriched data analysis of call statistics to council. It's acknowledged that ACR has limited capabilities and that the new customer relationship management software will be implemented in 2016 and will replace this ACR system. Therefore, these processes may change in the future. However, in the meantime, staff should put processes in place to provide proactive analysis. Now, as I mentioned, I do believe that the basic structure and roles and responsibilities of the division are fine. I do feel that if staff are to provide the value-added services that council desires, and also just simply because the city is growing, that we do need more staff. I'm recommending that another part-time constituency assistant be added as soon as budget permits, which will likely be in 2017 or beyond. In the meantime, a good alternative to permanent staff is to explore the use of paid co-op or intern positions. This provides much needed support to the constituency assistants at a lower cost on a temporary basis. It is recommended that these be longer term in nature, for example 4 to 8 months, rather than being short 3 to 4 week placements, as has been used in the past. This is because the effort of training placements to a point where they can be effective is wasted if they are only here less than a month. More value would be gained from having longer-term placements. Next, I feel the Chief of Staff role, regardless of what title is used, is valuable and should be retained and communicated more effectively so that everyone understands this value. In addition to supervising and managing the rest of staff in the division, this role plays an important part in managing interagency projects such as the Two-Way Go project and providing higher level support on policy issues, research, and strategy. By communicating what this role is meant to do, Council can then take advantage of this service. Providing regular status updates on the projects being worked on will provide Council with an idea of the capacity as well as keeping them in the loop on these issues. And finally, I do not recommend moving to a political model at this time. This model is successful in the larger municipalities because they have staff dedicated to individual council members who can handpick them. Since we have a shared model with multiple councillors using the same resources, this would not currently work. In addition, many of you have already commented that you wish for more continuity of staff, given that there have been a few leaves and turnover in the recent years. Having staff turn over every term of council would not achieve this goal, and corporate knowledge would be lost. So just to recap, I think the structure is fine, but that we need more capacity, and that the division needs to focus on providing those value-added services. So I'll open it up now for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that report, Karina. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Karina, for your presentation. My question is regarding co-op students, and in particular, one of the things you just phrased is the continuity of having staff. And I know from my experience, I've had zero continuity since I've been here. So, and things have been dropped because of that. And so I'm not understanding how a value add as a co-op student would be if they were to take on some of our roles, because to me it seems like you train them for half the time, and then as soon as they learn, they're gone. So
yeah, I agree that it's probably not the ideal solution, but in the absence of budget to hire a part-time constituency assistant, I think it's a good alternative. And that's why I'm also recommending that they be more of the standard school term, 4 months or 8 months, as opposed to a short 3-week placement.
Okay. My other question too is, and it's regarding with the ASR, or the CSR, or contact management system, whatever it is.
CRM.
CRM. To me, I think that's something we're really incredibly lacking in our department, and it's almost, in fact, I almost think it's embarrassing where we are today with regards to our office. And no offense to staff on that one, but I that's how I feel, and I think we lose a lot of engagement with residents because of things they seem to fall through the cracks. So, and this is something I expect, as being a counselor, that this should be one of the most important issues that we deal with, is to have proper engagement, proper record documentation of who we're communicating and whether or not who's being solved. So I want to know a little more about that, because it's this is a second term in, and still doesn't seems like some pie in the sky dream that's not going to be happening here anytime soon. So I want to know what's going on with that.
I think that's probably a question best answered by Jana. Ms. Miller?
Through the chair. I guess the best way to answer your question, Councillor Ioannidis, would be to give you a bit of an update on the CRM project. The CRM project, we were here, you'll recall, last year during the budget process. We are continuing to work towards having that in place, and it should be in place by the spring of 2016. And that is the system that will, the update of it will provide much more basis for analysis of constituent calls, where they're coming from. We'll be able to go ward by ward. The current system just doesn't provide us that capability. You're absolutely right.
Okay, so you're saying by 2016, early 2016?
The current projection, I believe, is April 2016.
Okay. Thanks for that. My other question is regarding your recommendation for part-time. How did you come to that conclusion when it seemed like there was 45% that looked like they needed more service? And in particular, knowing that we went through a business plan, I think part of that, one of the things that we had identified as a need was more community outreach. So for me, it doesn't seem like these things don't align together. So like, to me, it seemed like a more of a full-time position or something like that would be, or even a part-time, but rather sooner than later.
Yes, I think in an ideal world it would be sooner, but I was given to believe that there may not be any opportunity in the 2016 budget to add new staff at this point. In terms of it being part-time versus full-time, I think as you go through the exercise of determining what that outreach and support for the outreach looks like, you can better determine, is that a full-time position or is it a part-time? I based my part-time recommendation on the benchmarking and what other municipalities had. So the smaller municipalities had about 2.5 staff, so 2 full-time and 1 part-time. So I didn't feel that I could justify putting another full-time in with the current structure and the current tasks that are being outlaid. But if we determine that the outreach activities are much more robust than what I was thinking of, then certainly I think you could probably put the case forward for a full-time person.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Netsky.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your report. Very enlightening. It comes rather interestingly in terms of you addressing benchmarking in some municipalities where you say that the councillors are able to select and bring along their executive assistants and staff to complement their objectives. This is sort of more something that I would see in line, and maybe you can just analyze it or explain, that members of parliament and members of both provincial and federal, once they get elected, they have a staff of 2 or 3 that do this type of role. Is this the same thing that's happening at the municipal level that you're explaining?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So if that's the case, I find it very difficult to see how they could follow up in our city here, that right now we have 1 executive assistant for 5 councillors. And if we were to go to that direction, if I decide to choose to bring somebody in, and Councillor Schneider has his and Sarah has hers, I mean, we would have 5 different choices of 5 different people, yet we're only, there's only 2 executive assistants throughout the whole department to deal with 5 of us. That couldn't function, could it?
Right, which is why I'm not recommending it. I think that it's a model that works well for the larger municipalities, but not for us at this time.
And I guess in those municipalities, those councillors are full-time in terms of the nature of the size of the city and their nature of their work and the volume that they do and the size of the population that they represent. That necessitates, I guess, an executive assistant for every councillor. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, just I actually wanted to follow up on one of those last points. It probably wasn't within your mandate to look at full-time versus part-time when it comes to counselors. Was that right? But that may potentially, where I'm going is that may potentially influence of how many staff you need versus if council was full-time.
Potentially, yes. I would suggest, though, that your staff complement should be based on the assumption that everyone needs the support versus what is actually there, because your council may change at the term, and you may have different needs as you go forward. So you need to have that structure in place regardless of who's sitting on council.
You mentioned a few times within your presentation that the city's growing, and the fact that council itself has grown since the complement has grown itself. You may not be able to answer this question, but what was lost when the council size increased and the staff complement did not?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question at this point because I don't know the history.
There's 2 others that may be in here that might be able to answer. I guess that's information I would like to see, and if we can't see it now, it may be something to look at moving forward, depending on the direction that this ends up moving.
Are you looking to reply, Ms. McCabe?
Through you, Chair, if what you're asking is, was there a service level reduction in 2010? I'd have to go back and look, because I didn't start until the new council started in October 2010, although I believe there was some very minor rationalization of services. I would though my understanding though too was that there was, I don't think we didn't increase the complement in our office when the number of counselors went from 6 to 10. There was always 4. It was a repurposing of when someone else had left earlier in the year. That's again, I wasn't part of those discussions, but I think there was 4 when there was a council of 7, and there's still 4 with a council of 11.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
There's 4 more people, and there's still the same complement,
Yes,
right?
yeah. But if you want, I could follow up with you offline.
Well,
I
think my next question may help inform some of that. Maybe I missed it in the report, but what happens going forward? So you've given some of these recommendations. What happens to this information now? Whose role is it to kind of see it through? Where does it go from here?
So Jana and Dorothy will be taking the lead on this. I have already presented this to staff, and we've had some initial discussions on how we would move the recommendations forward, but it will be up to them to implement.
And so having that information, has there been any thought given to when we may see some results from these recommendations?
Ms. Miller? There you go. Go ahead.
So yes, Dorothy and I have had some initial conversations about it. The first order of business really will be to do that mission and mandate. I think that's where we will be able to really understand what is the work that is happening there now. Is it the right work? There may be some opportunity to change things in terms of what's being done, where we may be able to find some efficiencies. So I'd really like to do that piece first, and I'm looking at end of the year or early in the new year to be able to have that all done. It's going to require some work and some meetings with staff.
If we're going to look at the exploring the use of paid co-op students or interns in the meantime before looking at a part-time constituency assistant, is it something that you can also look at to see if there's meaningful roles we can give them? I just, in my experience here, haven't had much experience working directly with the co-op students, because my impression, rightly or wrongly, is that they're just given stuff to do on a computer. Is that something that can be looked at as that report's coming forward?
I'm sure it is.
Okay.
As part of the mandate work.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, Karina. Certainly some very big differences between our community and, of course, the larger community, but that would be expected, right? One question I had is when you said senior management, are you talking about just the deputy CAOs and the CAO, or did you go further than that?
No, just the deputies and the CAO. Yeah.
Okay, because you had said you had engaged 20.
Yeah, so there was Jana included in that as well.
Okay. And from your discussions with them, they felt that the mandate was being fulfilled for the most part.
Yes.
Okay. I guess in a way it's hard to ask some questions on this, because in a way it's related to personnel issues, right? I mean, any indication that we would have about either increasing, reducing, or changing roles is related to personnel issues. And isn't that something that we usually discuss in caucus?
If it's related to individuals, yes. As it relates to the structure itself, in terms of how many are they the right number of staff, then I think that's open for discussion.
Okay. I guess when I'm looking at things, when you're talking about social media and community engagement, we have other departments in the city that can help councillors do that kind of work, do we not?
Through the chair, in answer to your question, we do, but it doesn't fall within their mandate to do it for the Office of the Mayor and Council. That's tends to be specific to Mayor and Council staff. They do it on behalf of the organization.
I guess maybe some of my my thought was that you yourself, Ms. Miller, was a little bit more tied to the Mayor and Council's office with some of the work that you were doing, but I could be wrong. Maybe I need a clarification on that.
Not typically. I mean, I have oversight of the office in terms of the staff, but are you referring to my the work I personally do? Mm-hmm. I do it. It's the same sort of situation. It's on behalf of the organization, as opposed to in support of individual councillors.
Okay, that was I thought it was more oversight over the of the office in general, and so that was I was wondering, in a way, I guess, when we're looking at the organizational structure, that there's no that you're actually not included in this, and I was kind of puzzled by that. I thought that would have been part of the discussion. So is that, am I missing something, or am I not clear on?
The division reports to Jana, but we did not look at Jana's role specifically, as she handles a number of divisions. And just to follow up on the other comment, just about the engagement, the examples that yourselves gave me when I was interviewing you were things like helping you set up meetings in your ward for your community engagement activities that you personally wanted to do for your constituents, versus what Jana was talking about, which is more community engagement as a whole for all citizens.
Okay, all right. I know that there was some comments in the report with regarding to the Chief of Staff and the sorry, I can't find it immediately, but dividing some of, adding some additional role responsibilities from the Chief of Staff to some council, and possibly changing some of that mandate. Is that discussions that you're going to have further, or is that, I didn't see anything in your recommendations related to that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't recommending taking anything away from the Chief of Staff role. I think the tasks involved in that role aren't much needed ones. In terms of the mandate and mission discussion, the division as a whole can rationalize what are the tasks that they will provide for council. Are there things that could go back to councillors for them to do themselves? And that's the discussion that they're going to have.
One of the things that I think that I guess I was hoping I would see in this was where council could step up to do some things on their own. I mean, there's I personally organize for the most part any of my community engagement pieces. Some councillors send their columns directly into the Kitchener Citizen. Was there no discussion about a differentiation between the ability for council to do some of that work on their own and some of it that would be less burden? I mean, some of that just seems sort of typical to the job, I guess.
And I think everyone's at a different point. I mean, there are certainly some of you who indicated to me that you prefer to do those tasks yourself, and there's others that need some more assistance, or they need the time to do those types of activities just based on other things that are going on with them. So I think it's all quite individual. Having said that, I think when Jana goes through that mandate discussion, they may find that there are some tasks that they really shouldn't be doing for councillors. Mm-hmm. I haven't gone into that level of detail to determine what those are, but there may be some.
So given that you did this audit sort of shortly after an election, and we had 2 new councillors, and in 4 years, it's constantly changing and evolving. Is that one of the challenges that the office may have, is that there's always that, first year for sure, that new councillors are just trying to, find their way, and staff is probably a little bit busier than they would be maybe in year 2 or 3 or 4 of a term?
Absolutely. I think certainly with new counselors, you're still finding your way in terms of what are all the administrative processes and policies and procedures that you need to follow. So having administrative support to help you walk through all those hurdles is very important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. Thanks. I may have comments after.
Councillor Marsh?
Thank you. Just to follow up on that last line of questioning, did you, in your analysis or in your questioning of the CAs, did you ask about what degree their workload has increased based on supporting new counselors versus supporting counselors who are already have already had one term at least?
I didn't ask the question specifically, but it did come out in the conversations. And when I was talking about, what do you do? Do you feel that you're busy or not enough busy or too busy? And it came out that yes, that they do feel as a council turns over, there's always a little bit more extra work.
Sure. All right. And also, I don't remember you asking when we had our conversation, and I don't think it came up, but I'm starting to wonder to what degree it may have come up in your conversations about counselors who are able to do most of their own community engagement and appointments, appointment making, etc. Did they discuss the number of hours that they're putting into this, what is officially a part-time role?
No, that did not come up, although, as you said, it did come up in the context that some counselors are very comfortable doing a lot of the administrative tasks that staff are doing for others.
I find it interesting that, some counselors around the Horseshoe I understand, do work part-time in addition to this part-time role, but the majority have no other official working role, and so perhaps would have more time to put into to this part-time role. And I think that it would be worth, exploring as follow-up to understand, is this still a part-time role, or is it actually turning into, by default, a full-time role? Also, I was surprised, like Councillor Ioannidis, that the recommendation is we are at capacity, and so the constituent assistants, we should add at least a part-time role in the future, but not until after this next budget, because we won't have the budget. But my understanding is that we, as a council, we determine the budget. So, can you help us understand where that's coming from?
Just based on my observations from what has come through our initial budget discussions, and I know that there is need for other positions across the corporation that may be more important than this role, I'm not sure, but certainly if it was the will of council that you wanted to put this forward, then you need to make those decisions, and it may mean increasing tax rates in order to supply this position.
Mr. Wilmer, you wanted to add something?
So certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, I agree with what Karina has said. It certainly wasn't within the scope of this review to look at that, but further to that, we do have direction from council to maintain service levels and to keep tax increases at the rate of inflation. So, in that light, we really didn't feel that we should be introducing situations where we're recommending additional staff.
Thank you. Okay, so I just wonder if there's opportunity, instead of looking for a paid co-op placement that would turn over at least every 3 to 4 months, if not more frequently, would we not, as another alternative to look into, be able to look at the potential for a part-time contract position that's not necessarily a permanent position within our scope of employment, being an employer in a unionized environment? Are there not contract positions that can be introduced before a permanent one is introduced?
Certainly that could be looked at. It would come at a higher cost than a co-op or intern position. The reason why I recommended the co-ops as well was it's something that has been introduced already to the office that everyone was very supportive of, not only for the extra help that it provided, but for the exposure it gave to students to government, the workings of government. So.
Absolutely, and I also am fully in support of that. But if we also want to look at supporting the current staff that we have that are at capacity, I think that more than that position does require a lot of training as well and oversight. And so I'm just putting it out there, but by no means do I mean to put down the idea of co-op students. So, all right, that's all. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, and thanks, Mr. Wilmer, for touching upon the first question I had. Just to go into it a little bit deeper, though, I know there are needs for more staff across the corporation. Like, for example, the most recent one that came to mind through audit was the need in the market for, I believe it was, a couple more members of staff. So do we have an idea of the number of staff in an ideal situation that we'd want to add across the corporation? Or that we will see in immediate future budgets in the next couple of years?
Through the Mayor, I think the quick answer is no. We haven't done a tally of that. I think our first priority really is to, and I think Karina's findings and recommendations are a good example of it, where we see a need for additional capacity, the first thing we will try to do is look at where we can create more capacity within an existing team. If there's work we can discontinue, that would be our first way to create capacity. The second would be through vacancy management across the whole organizations. If there are needs for a position in, say, the Office of the Mayor and Council, and we can create a redundancy elsewhere in the organization and then transfer the headcount, that would be our second priority. So it's really almost a last resort that we would come to Council saying we need additional headcount.
Okay, that's good to hear. Another question for either Mr. May or Ms. Miller on the customer service piece that we'll be seeing next year. Like Councillor Ioannidis, one of the biggest concerns I've had is things falling through. Not a reflection of our staff, but just items, the thousands of little random items we deal with, such as a sign not being installed, and you send it off into the ether and you assume it's done until a resident contacts you sometime later to let you know that, in fact, it has not been done yet. So my question, and there's some redundancy there in burdening that on our staff inside of our office. So my question is, when this piece is done and it's implemented, do you anticipate that it will lessen the workload of the staff in the OMC?
It's hard to predict at this moment, but I anticipate that what they will be able to do is get far better stats and analysis than they can for you right now, much, much easier than they can for you right now. It's a very manual process, so yes, it's difficult to predict, but I think there definitely could be some efficiency there.
Okay. And I'm just not going to make any comments, but just a quick point as well. What I'm hearing from a lot of members of council is they want to do more work with engagement and outreach, and I respect that. But I'm not entirely certain that we should be looking at that in isolation within the Office of the Mayor and Council. Perhaps, I know, for example, the City of Guelph has some sort of consolidated office of outreach and engagement. That could be a model that we look at as well as something that they can explore when looking at this more closely.
Ms. Miller?
You might recall that just recently an announcement went out. We have hired, from internally actually, a community engagement consultant. And so while it's not a centralized office, so to speak, he'll be working in the CAO's office and will be able to provide some support. I know Ms. McCabe has done quite a bit of work with councillors to try and determine what are the outreach opportunities you're looking for and what kind of engagement do you want to do. You know, he'll be able to provide some additional advice and support on that piece. And the other piece is, one of his first orders of business will be to acquire and implement the e-participation platform, which is the platform that will enable citizens to talk to us on any number of things online in a much more convenient way than they can right now. So hopefully that will also provide a wealth of information that we don't currently have and have difficulty providing when we do engagement campaigns with the city. So I think you'll see a great amount of improvement in terms of community engagement and the support we're able to give to that just with the new position and the new platform.
Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. to Karina. Karina, I don't envy you this task because from where I sit, the mayor and every councillor have far different abilities on how to do most of what is stated in this particular report. I did want to ask you one question on page 1.4, the part, and this is purely because of my background, where it says they've missed opportunities in the past due to lack of resources. Okay. Another idea mentioned by several was to create a public affairs media relations position. Can you just elaborate on that a little? Because I thought, as a city, we already had a media relations department, communications department.
Yes, and the mandate of the Communications and Marketing Division was set out that it was not to provide support for individual councillors, but more for the corporate messaging. So what this was talking about was more someone specifically within your Office of Mayor and Council that would help you with your own getting messages out about certain things like events that you're having in your ward, different community engagement things that you personally are doing for your constituents versus what the Communications Division does, which is corporate-wide.
Okay. And I agree with Councillor Marsh that, in my opinion, councillors like me, who are fortunate to be retired, obviously have more opportunity to do this work than those who are still trying to hold down other positions. And that goes for the media as well. I guess in the back of my mind, rather than creating part of a position to deal with the media, why we wouldn't spend far less money to train councillors on how to deal with the media and how to recognize a story when they see it. I'd also add, by the way, as a qualifier, and it doesn't come out in here, having spent my lifetime in newsrooms, I can tell you that news releases that come from our staff usually go straight in the garbage. So I would hate to add to that by having people in the mayor and councillor's office churning out more releases that are going to end up in the same way. You have to learn how to deal with the media and how to recognize what they're interested in.
And I think that's a great idea to add some capacity. I think, sure, some training for council is great. I don't think that I was suggesting, though, that part-time position be strictly about the media relations. It's more about providing administrative support for helping you set up the event, everything that goes along with that, including the media part of it.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Thank you, and I agree with the point that Councillor Etherington said, that we all have varying different skill sets, and I can only fantasize about writing as sharply as you can, or being able to smell a story when there is one. Karine, you said about capacity. Currently, you said staff, in their opinion, in our mayor and council staff, they see that they are being able to achieve what their mandates are, but it would be very difficult for them to expand their role beyond that.
Yes,
so it would be very difficult then also to think that to broaden their role beyond what their current capacity is. Is it fair to say not all council members conduct themselves similarly as to their engagement, their function in their office, and as their role the same way? Everyone does more or less or differently. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Were you able to assess that, picking, without choosing names or anything, an example, one councillor that may be very engaged, very active, and requiring a lot more assistance and facilitating within the mayor and council office to engage within that work? If all council members were to be as demanding or say as active, it would be very difficult for the staff in our office to be able to achieve or be able to function in their other roles as well.
Yeah, I didn't really assess the level that each of you are doing in terms of engagement, so I can't really comment on that. But I did hear that some of you are doing more of the administrative tasks than others?
Because I think that should have been as a part of the review as well. It's very easy for each of us to be able to sit and say, well, we could do this differently. Perhaps other council members could do more or less or different when we don't know what each of us do. Or in some cases, other opinions where they derive that perhaps we have existing software models that could encompass what we do in our role and engagement with our constituency, when perhaps they don't do the same thing themselves. So this aspect of software that perhaps may allow us to be more efficient in community engagement, is it true to say that the software is not a point of contact or person response system? It still would require additional added work of following up, calling. What I'm saying is, as opposed to customer service relations, it's somewhat different than actually following up and managing a complaint on a more one-to-one personal level than what just the software may be able to provide in data.
The difference between the CRM, what you'll be able to do, the CRM, you'll receive system notifications in terms of the steps that requests are at, and we'll be able to close the loop with customers and things like that in a way that we haven't been able to do before. The e-participation software functions basically by creating a large database, if you will, of citizens who sign up to be a part of it. That's not to say you couldn't do individual follow-up. There are some examples of cities who are using the software, and councillors have engaged on it with people. So privacy probably prevents us from providing you an actual email address or anything like that, but it's not to say you couldn't have some interactive dialogue. People do that.
But when we have calls coming into our constituency office, it still requires time to be able to follow up on that complaint when it's referred to a particular department, and then sometimes even just picking up the phone call and asking, were you happy with the result? Are there still additional concerns? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Schneider?
Thank you. Gianna, probably more for you, the CRM software. In terms of dealing with a constituent's question or complaint, I'll often get a direct email, and then I go to staff and say, they're complaining about the trees not being trimmed on their street. Who do I go to? With the CRM software, is there going to be the possibility, whether they contact the city through the website, that they would automatically be able to tip off the affected department and the councillors so that we can coordinate a good response to them? And also, if we get a direct email or call from a constituent, would we be able to access the CRM software to lodge their question or complaint? For me, it's the coordinating of the staff members that can get the response to them. So that would certainly cut down a lot of time for me.
So there is definitely that capability in terms of how the CRM will be launched. It's going to roll out first in the corporate contact center.
Can you move your mic a little closer?
Sorry, it's going to roll out first in the corporate contact center and the office of mayor and council. So if you are if a constituent is calling you directly with a concern, we haven't worked out what the process for that would be yet. I mean, I suppose you could, there'd be the opportunity for you to enter it in the system. You may want to do that still through a constituency assistant so that they can make sure that, the process is followed and notifications go out and the loop is closed. I don't know yet for sure what that process will look like. We're not that far.
Okay. I'd say it would be very helpful if we can respond to the citizen as soon as possible, saying we have received your issue, right, and the correct departments have been notified, and we're working on a resolution or getting you answers.
Absolutely, and as soon as it goes into the CRM, it will trigger that kind of response to say that it's there, it's being looked at.
Because currently, right now, somebody could call the call center, and we as councillors never hear about that. It's dealt with nicely, but it would be nice for us as Councillor Singh suggested to make that follow-up call. Understand you called our call center. Are you pleased with the service? Just so that's tied up nicely. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Is there any further questions by other members?
I have one other councillor.
Because I want to put forward a recommendation.
There's no motion required.
I know,
for
but
this.
I want to put one forward.
Okay. I'll come back to you then, Councillor Fernandez.
I guess I apologize, Karina, because this is kind of a question that's being directed to Jenna as well. But when you were looking at the staffing, did you, and understanding that there's various levels of vacation time and days off and things like that our staff is entitled to depending on their years of service, did you look at the number of weeks that we were sitting at 2 staff in mayor and council office over the last year?
No, I did not look at that specifically. I mean, there's the 3 staff, the 2 constituency assistants and the assistant to the mayor. If each of them had 4 weeks, then you're looking at 12 weeks.
Yeah, but isn't Ms. McCabe part of that component as well?
She would be, but her duties are different. So if you're talking about how thinly spread are we with handling the constituency concerns and some of that frontline stuff, I know that Ms. McCabe does handle some of that, but a lot of her duties are related to projects and to managing the staff. So,
okay, I guess that's. And so my second question is geared to Ms. Miller. My understanding when we rolled out Ping Street that was supposed to be a component of community engagement, that people would be take a picture of a pothole, take a picture of a sign down, take a picture of something, and send it in. Why hasn't that been rolled out completely to do exactly what I'm hearing around the horseshoe here, to be responding to residents' complaints and concerns? Because now it sounds like we've got another layer or another level of engagement that we're going to layer on top of that, which is additional costs. So where are we? 2 questions. Where are we on this Ping Street community engagement piece, and where does that layer on this CRM?
So Ping Street is a mobile app, as you know. As I understand, I don't have the latest numbers with me, but people are using it for the purposes that you've just described in terms of taking photos and submitting them when they see issues. I think the last I recall, the number was somewhere around 255 issues that have been reported directly through Ping Street that have been followed up on via the contact center. So when they receive them, they initiate the same process that they do for any other complaint that might be received from citizens. I'm not sure, I don't know if you know what the latest numbers are, but our numbers for Ping Street in terms of downloads are somewhere around 7,500 right now. It's the number 1 ranked Ping Street in the province at the moment.
It's not the downloads that are the indicator of whether that piece of engagement, community engagement, is working. It's the number of times that people send in an issue and that it's followed through to an end result, is it not?
That's just one piece of it, that's true. And I can get you those numbers if you'd like. The other piece of it is, that sort of demonstrates the success of it, is how many times people are going. I don't know if you know how Ping Street is set up, but there are icons inside of it for trails, events, any number of things. We just added GRT, hospital wait times, road construction was updated. So one of the measures of success is how many times people are going to those places and using them. And I know that trails and events were the highest over the summer, and they were in the thousands. I can get you the exact numbers if that would.
I'd appreciate that, because I just feel like we keep rolling out another community engagement piece, and then the council wants to do their own, and the city is doing something, and I'm starting to feel like we've got all these different objectives in these initiatives, but none of them are really fitting in together to be as seamless as Councillor Schneider just indicated. Hearing a concern, following it up with staff, closing the loop completely. And it shouldn't just be about concerns, of course, but it's all kinds of other community engagement pieces. I'm going to make some comments if I can, since it doesn't look like, apparently there's nobody else who has questions, or are we going to have comments after Councillor Ioannidis?
Well, go ahead and make your comments.
Okay. So, you know, this is my 5th year as a city councillor, and certainly the first year and a year and a half was a big, huge learning curve. You know, I'm the kind of person who likes to do things on my own and go through that. Everybody has different personalities. Some people have part-time jobs, other people have other responsibilities in their lives. But when I've been here in the office, I have to say that, and I may be cutting off my nose to spite my face here, but that very often our office have 2 staff working, and sometimes a single person working on their own, and maybe they are managing and maybe they're not managing. That's very hard to say. But things seem to be moving along okay. I'm getting a sense from some of the comments that there's a desire to add another staff person. I really think that now that our new councillors have had a year under their belts, that we should be continuing to look at an opportunity with a co-op student. If we still see in a year from now, with the CRM implemented, with a co-op student who has got, you know, a 4-month term here, that there's things that are being missed, then I think we should be considering adding additional funding or additional staff. But until that happens, I think we're jumping the queue. I think that there are many areas we're going to see in the next couple of months where staff want to add more staff, and I think that maybe it's just the onus needs to be on us a little bit, for some of us, to say, I can do this myself. I could try to do this myself.
Okay. I have, I guess, some questions/comments, and then I'll come to Councillor Singh. Do you have a question? Okay. I'll actually, mine are more comments than questions, so I'll hold off till the end. Councillor Singh, and then we'll go to Councillor Ioannidis.
I can let Councillor
Okay, Councillor Ioannidis, if you want to click in.
I'm just wondering, through you, Mayor Verbanovic, whether or not any valid by having staff, you know, provide an issue paper with regards to a part-time position for budget time.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll look to staff to respond, but I guess my initial reaction would be that, as we've heard, it's staff's intent to take these recommendations away and look at these issues and make some additional changes and bring recommendations back as they you know, think it's appropriate and timely. There are challenges, as we heard, in terms of the budget, and ultimately it's up to council to decide what they want to add or not add, and it will have budget implications one way or the other. But I also think we need to keep in mind, I mean, our collective responsibility is to also not just sort of look at our office, but look at the overall operation, and there are a number of areas that have had previous audits and so on, and I think of legal, I think of IT, and others that have recommended additional staff, and that's never worked its way here. So I guess it hasn't made its way up the queue yet, and I think we just need to be careful. While I understand the need for additional staffing, and concur with it, I think we just need to make sure it fits in as part of the overall priorities of the organization.
I still want to put that forward because, to me, 2017 seems 3/4 of this term will be over. So I've basically been on council for, that'd be almost 6 years on council, 7 years on council without having some form of proper support. And to me, I think what we provide is a valuable service, and that's what I think the level of service that we provide is lacking. And so, to me, we're not up to our commitment of what residents expect us. So that's why I want to have this put forward. Whether it passes through budget time or not, it's another story. I can wait. Then, if it passes, then we move forward with it. But if it doesn't, I can wait till 2017. Then I guess I don't have a choice.
Okay, so you're asking for it to come forward as an issue paper. Okay. Is there a seconder? Councillor Singh. Okay.
And I do have a few comments.
Okay, go ahead.
When I can understand how some members of council, may not need the use of having more staff time, and that's because maybe they may have, they have mature children, they don't have young children to deal with at home, or they may be retired, or they may be whatever their priority is. They may, I know for myself, I do have other work, and I do have young kids, and the job description that we did, as we applied for originally here, is a part-time position. So coming in, I expected to have some level of support to initiate some of the things that I wanted to do as a counselor. So, recognizing that, I think it's important that this gets looked at again, because we did add more members of council than was previously. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And then when you have the statistics say, our compliments compared to other municipalities, whether big or small, have way more complement than us, maybe that's saying something. And then we have 45% that think that there is merit to it. So I think there's some valid concerns here. So that's all.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you, and pleased to be able to second this. I think 2017 would also be far too long, especially for this term of council. In our previous term, more at the beginning, I had tried to, I saw this as a deficiency in our current staffing model, and I had tried putting something forward. We didn't have that approved, and I saw that to allow more time to see how the structure could be evolved or changed, and I think I have had numerous conversations through our internal staff and the chief of staff as well. And I've seen improvements, but I think it's not about can we do more things ourselves. I think can we do more things better. Our citizens should expect more of us, and they should expect better results. And to ensure that you have better results, you fundamentally need to have a support structure along with you. That, or we look at consideration of a full-time model for our council members, and I'm perhaps not prepared there, because I think just by having additional support would allow us to do the same, would make us more capable to achieve the same in our constituency and on our term of council, by having that support with a lot lesser cost associated, rather than making all 10 council members consider full-time. And I think the need for us to be more engaged and be able to function and improve our ability to be more responsive to our community, I think that's a key aspect of why we're here. And I think if there's additional help that can allow us to be able to do that, I think that's a great return on our investment. Just to be able to ensure that there's less empathy, and our citizens are not pathetic of that the government doesn't care, that their voices don't matter. You can have all the softwares in the world, but at the end of the day, I said this before, it takes a time, effort to be able to connect someone at the door, to be able to pick up the phone and have a conversation and really figure out what their ideas are about their city, not my ideas. I'm not here just to tell people what I think what the city should be. What are their ideas about their neighborhood, about their city, and the vision for the city as well. And that takes time, that takes effort, and that takes support. That's why I support the issue paper, and hopefully look forward to further discussion part of budget.
Councillor Etherington?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have no problem supporting this move for an issue paper, but I would warn that when it comes down to the crunch, if it became a budget question of an extra person in our office, or an extra person, for example, on bylaw enforcement, if it came down to a situation where one eyesore property can gut an entire community and neighborhood, if there's a choice there, I think I would come down on the side of the additional bylaw stuff rather than this. But as you say, we need to see the whole smorgasbord of what is being requested before we can make that decision.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock?
Yeah, I'm actually right there with Councillor Etherington at this point. I think there can be a lot of work that can be accomplished over the next couple months with regards to the mission and mandate and the further analysis from the findings today that can really help inform an issue paper. And maybe that issue paper comes back and says something to the effect of, we found some efficiencies, we're not going to move forward at this time. And so I think allowing some of that extra work to happen over the next couple months and having an issue paper come forward is the best way to do it. At that time, again, it's already been said that we'll be able to look at it in the broader context of the overall budget, and that's what I would want to see at the end of the day. I do just want to remind everyone that we did have a full-time, I can't remember 100% if it was a full-time or a part-time staff in the budget in 2010 in order to handle the increased size of council, and that council chose not to move forward with that at the time in a cost-saving measure, which I believe at the time I agreed with as well. But I think we need to just remind ourselves that there are 4 more people that are being supported by the same complement that increased in 2010. So I'm definitely willing to support it as is, to have an issue paper come forward again so that you can look at the broader context of the whole corporation and make that decision accordingly.
Councillor Netsky.
In regards to comments on this report, I want to touch base on just a couple of things here, 2 or 3 things actually. In terms of the staff complement, I have been a staff person with the city back for several decades, and you can see by walking through different departments and dealing with staff as to the efficiency of those who work hard and are overloaded with work versus those who are not. And you can certainly tell over a period of time where the demand is for work and overtime and stuff of that nature versus those areas that are looking for work. I would agree that with Councillor Fernandez, maybe we should take a look at a staff person, maybe, but holding off on that in the meantime and considering it. But if this certainly passes, well, something the council will have to review over the next over the budget time period. In regards to the Chief of Staff title, I'm of the opinion we do have a Chief of Staff, basically being Mr. Jeff Wilmer. He's the chief of the whole city here, and that's probably the most appropriate title for him, although he's really the CEO, and that's a title that we use. And I find that I was one of those who questioned the title as being questionable and not fitting into the nature. And I'm wondering whether staff will be reviewing that as part of this analysis that's done by Karina. In terms of the executive assistants and having, there's 5 of councillors that are associated or tied in with one executive assistant. And if you're going to split those roles to have one executive assistant deal with appointments and calls coming, etc., and then dealing with another executive assistant for other matters, I think that's going in the wrong direction. I think what's recommended here is fine, that the executive assistant that we're assigned to should remain and would be responsible for all the duties that are required that we're involved with, because otherwise it'd be confusing going back and forth and you're dealing with 2 different people, and I think we should stick the way we have it right now. So I'm totally in agreement with that.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. I have a general principle that I support issue papers unless they're completely ridiculous, which this is not. Just one quick question of clarification. The issue paper, did it specify whether it was it's supposed to come back as just a reflection of this report, or is it going to be a full-time, like a full FTE or a half? Part-time. Okay, so it's part-time FTE. Okay, that's okay. So yes, I will support it. I'll support the issue paper. I want to be clear that I don't intend on supporting this when it comes to budget, simply because I think that there's going to be a huge impact on with our customer relations software package, and I think in the very least we should see what kind of fruit that bears in terms of efficiencies before adding. As the CAO put it, I think adding staff is an avenue of last resort, and I think we need to explore every other option. I just want to touch briefly on this title issue of Chief of Staff. Generally, I think titles are often inconsequential. They don't really mean a whole heck of a lot. I'm reminded of a Simpsons episode where Homer started a company and named himself junior vice president. But this is actually a situation where it does matter. When someone is out lobbying higher levels of higher orders of government on our behalf, I think it's much more important that a title of chief of staff seems more appropriate than assistant to the mayor's office, for example. So hopefully that's been put to rest. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, if not, I'll just make mine. First of all, I want to thank Karina for the work that she did in preparing this report. I think it has provided us with a good reflection of the varied viewpoints and some of the issues and challenges that we have as a division. But I think the one thing that it is very clear on, and that for me is the most important, that's that we have a very dedicated and hardworking staff in our division who do a great job of serving the members of this council. And that, for me, first and foremost, was important. I think as we go forward, there are a number of things that will potentially impact the workload in our area going forward, CRM being one of them. It can potentially take away some workload. It can potentially add some workload depending on how things develop and who's responsible for what, as well as looking at the mission and mandate and so on, and what should rest with our staff's division versus potentially in other areas of the organization, including the new community engagement role that Ms. Miller reminded us of, that potentially can assist with some of the issues that have been raised. I will support the issue paper coming forward, but I'll do it because it'll simply provide some additional information for council to consider and for staff to look at as they go on, they move forward in terms of the implementation of the recommendations. To be clear, I'm not convinced at this point in time that in fact we need that additional body until we have some of those other answers that I think we need to know around mission mandate and so on. But that can flow out over the next while, and we'll have a better sense after that is done. I think I do want to reiterate that as we look at this, we can't look at it outside of the context of the broader organization and some of the needs that we know haven't been met, because I don't think that would be appropriate. But at the same time, and this is something that Karina referenced, is when we look at our staffing model, it needs to be based on the assumption that council is part-time. The fact that some or most of council are doing it full-time right now ultimately shouldn't matter in terms of the staffing model. It may be giving us some additional leeway or latitude right now, but the reality is the council model is meant to be part-time for councillors in terms of people having other responsibilities, jobs, work life responsibilities, and so on. And so so the staffing model, even though some may feel that it's adequate for them, others who do have other responsibilities, whether it be family responsibilities, full-time, part-time work, and so on, those are very real and need to be considered, I think, as we go forward as well. Other than that, I think that pretty much... Oh, and just on the issue of the title, I'll just reiterate the comments that Councillor Davey made. If folks recall, back when the role was created, and I guess there would only be 3 of us that were around back when it was created, the title was really done to be commensurate with some other similar roles in municipalities, some of which were looked at, some of which weren't, in the province, and to be able to communicate it at a level that's appropriate when we're doing advocacy and other kinds of works with other orders of government. So with that, Councillor Ioannidis' motion has been made, and that's that a report on a half-time position, an issue paper rather, come forward at budget time. And so all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Karina, I know we're running a little late. The petty cash verification is a very positive report. Can you really shorten it for us potentially?
Sure. So this is just my standard annual petty cash audit that handles all locations where we have petty cash floats. What it is comprised of is I show up unannounced to the location and I essentially just count their cash and their receipts and make sure that this equals the float amount that they are supposed to have. I also check some other things, such as whether the safe was locked when I walked in, that there's not very many people that have access to the safe. I make sure that the deposits are current so that they don't have large sums of money sitting in their safe, and that any other assets that they have, such as bus tickets, swim passes, other things like that, that they are safeguarded appropriately. And I make note of any other weaknesses that I see at the time. So as with every year so far, all of the variances were minor. There were 25 out of 30 locations that had less than a $5 variance, either over or short. 6 of the locations actually balanced to the penny. 15 had positive variances, meaning that they had more money than they were supposed to have. 9 had negative variances, meaning that they were short money, but the largest one was $7, which I am really not concerned about. The reconciliations were all current. The processes were in control. So I have no issues with the petty cash at all. I am making a change to my process, however, going forward. Just my time spent out in the field doing these audits and my travel costs outweighs the risk. These balances are usually only $100 to $300, the floats that they carry, and like I said, the over or shorts are only about $5 or less. So the risk doesn't really justify my cost. I still think it's worthwhile to do these and keep it in and of itself as a deterrent to theft if they know that I could come at any time. So I'm going to be changing my process to be done biannually instead of annually, and done not across all locations, but simply randomly or based on highest risk areas. Done.
Great. Any questions? If not, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll take 5 minutes and we'll start our next session, our strat session. It's in here.